Welcome in, Whappers, where today I'm coming to you guys from an undisclosed location. I know I had to miss school yesterday because of a personal day. Hope the test went well. The goal today is pretty simple. I want to cover what I call sneaky topics that are bound or potentially going to appear on next Thursday's AP exam. And yes, you heard that right, next Thursday. So we are in all-in mode here as we barrel towards the very last week before the AP exam. What I want to do is sort of emphasize the sneaky topics by period. A lot of you over the course of the year have lamented the difficulty in trying to keep track of the time periods. I did post on Thursday or Friday of last week a resource on Google Classroom that directly takes you to the College Board's AP website for students, where it does go into detail about some of the major themes for every time period that we've covered this year. But I want to reaffirm the strategy that we're going to take into the exam on Thursday. Remember, period 1 and 2 will feature on the multiple choice. You are going to get period 1 and 2 questions on the multiple choice portion of the AP. However, you will not be required to write any short answer, LEQ, or DBQ on periods 1 and 2 unless you choose. There will be options of writing samples from period 1 and 2, but again, for the most part, you're going to be in a situation where you could opt out of writing period 1 and period 2 topics. So I don't find it absolutely necessary to invest as much of your time studying period 1 and period 2 as I would suggest studying other time periods, periods 3 through 6. But in period 1, I would say the most common theme that's usually asked is the environment. There's a lot of questions about humans' relationship to the environment. We're going to cover on Tuesday how this was a change over time topic, that over time, humankind's relationship to the environment has changed irrevocably. And we're also going to move into a modern space with that conversation as well, because the environment questions also tend to be coming from period 6. So what I would say about studying the effects of the environment on period 1, remember when we read about the Neolithic Revolution and how the spread of sedentary lifestyle did a lot of damage to the environment because humans were settling in one area, as well as pastoralism because of the amount of grazing that animals living in these sedentary communities, they tended to really beat down the environment. So I think period 1, sneaky topic, relationship with the environment. That could be in terms of degradation, but it could also be for positive. The ability to manipulate the environment through irrigation, building of dams, buildings. Out of using nature as architectural inspiration, like many Native American tribes did here, building their cave homes and whatnot. But I think period 1, environmental themes tend to run pretty common. For period 2, I think that religion is the sneaky topic. And although it's a kind of an obvious one, that's typically where most of the questions come from on religion. And of the world major religions, period 2 is really the development of Christianity and Catholicism, the spread of Buddhism out of India with Ashoka the Great, as well as Hinduism and all the polytheistic religions as well. But period 2, a sneaky topic there is religion. I think if there is going to be one topic that you invest time with in period 2, well, I would say 2 topics, okay? Religion is one of them, for sure. Don't ignore religion, because that's PSF. Religion crosses over into other time periods. The other topic is going to be empire building. Some of the parallels between empire building, which when we mentioned way back when, we talked about the 3 different reasons for empire building: wars, religious spread, and trade. That's a big process of empire building. But empire building, just like religion, and I think this is the key strategy here. When you look at empire building, and you look at religion, those are two topics that really become entrenched within period 2. However, those have PSF opportunities galore. Those are topics that do transcend other time periods. So whatever you can find, and the same I would say for environmentalism in period 1, whatever you can find that crosses over between period 1 and 2 to other time periods, that's the kind of topic I think you need to be on alert for. Plus, it does give you plenty of opportunity in essay form that if you have a question and you're looking for PSF, you can revert back to periods 1 and 2. Now, within the topic of religion, we clearly covered Christianity quite well. Everything from the development of Catholicism as a major world force in Europe, especially after the fall of the Roman Empire. But even we talked then about the splits, and the splits within the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, and then eventually the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. Splitting of the religions could be a very nice theme for you guys to build upon, because you also have that happening with Buddhism, where Buddhism has two major schools. You have Theravada Buddhism and you have Mahayana Buddhism. Hey, I said it properly there, I think. Mahayana Buddhism. Then I didn't say Buddhism correct, but I'm not going to stop this thing because I got a busy day. But regardless, just to recover those two topics real quick, Theravada Buddhism, the way I would remember that is T for Thailand. Thailand's one of the home bases of Theravada Buddhism, and also Southeast Asia, predominantly speaking, that's the majority religion there. So you can remember Theravada Buddhism, Thailand, tie that in with Thailand. And then Mahayana Buddhism is mostly in East Asia, so parts of China, Korea, Japan, Mongolia, that neighborhood of the world. But when it comes to the splitting of the religion, you've got multiple religions that have split over time. That could, again, be another type of sneaky topic. But the last thing I'll say about religion is that you should absolutely be aware of is missionary work. This is always one of those topics that seems to come up. And missionaries were prominent in almost every major world religion with the exception of one, Judaism. Judaism has typically and historically frowned upon missionary work, whereas Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, Christianity, most of the, and especially Islam, which didn't emerge till period 3, but nonetheless, Islam is a shining example of a religion that spread via missionaries. You should really, really go back and review missionary work before the AP. It almost always seems to come up as a topic that you all need to be aware of. So I would, again, hammer missionaries and make sure that that's a topic you guys are comfortable with. Moving into period 3, the post-classical period, the majority of what I would say to be well aware of here, the spread of Islam and how important that was. But the sneaky topics from period 3 tend to be the rise of the Native American societies and South America, in Central America, as well as North America. So don't forget how we talked about how important those developments were in terms of trade routes. It was a great example of trade routes in the Americas. We often don't think of the native societies there having extensive, well-developed trade routes, but there certainly were the existence of some of those. The one being in the Mississippi River Valley, Cahokia, that city of Cahokia was a great example of a trade city that emerged in period 3. But I think that's a sneaky period 3 topic. And period 3 topics do tend to focus on themes such as trade, the opening up of trade. And of course, then you have the development of African kingdoms related to trade. So I would review trade routes in period 3. In period 4, I don't know if there's anything that's so sneaky as much as it is just remembering that that's the age of exploration. And so the Columbia Exchange always seems to feature prominently, and there's bound to be different stimulus-based questions with the Columbian Exchange somehow manipulated into those questions. I also think that in period 4, the change that and the result of the people, how people were affected by the global interactions that were occurring is a really central theme within period 4. You saw that on one of your LEQ options during the mock, and a lot of people missed that point, that how it impacted people. So you've got to pay close attention on essay and SAQ questions, because of that nuance there with, focusing on people and how it affected people. So be aware that that's definitely something that you guys need to kind of have in your memory bank, to just remind yourself to make sure that you're reading those questions super carefully. But I don't think as we get into the modern topics, period 4 and 5 we covered very extensively. I think period 6 is the one where maybe there's a couple topics, and I'll go over those. But period 4, period 5, you also have to be very well aware of movements such as the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance. I mean, that's all tied into that time period. And as I said earlier, you always have to be thinking about how these topics cross over periods. Those are going to be most likely the topics that certainly are going to be potential essays, crossover topics that can bleed into and influence other time periods. I think are the best chances for those to appear on a long essay or DBQ or SAQ topic. But period 6, we've really been doing a good job. We're going to get through feminism on Monday. We're going to get through environmentalism issues and then globalization as well on Wednesday. I think that, heading into the exam, one of the topics that has come up quite a bit in the past, I mentioned sports, there should be no surprise there. But one of the topics that does seem to come up a lot with period 5, period 6 is Japan's economy. The Japanese economy, which we know under the Meiji Restoration, Japan was one of the few Asian countries that was able to industrialize rapidly, and thus that put Japan on a path towards them becoming eventually a world power and striking out in World War II to begin an imperialist program. And when it comes to Japan, something else that I want you guys to sort of be familiar with is the fact that in Japan, after World War II, the Japanese, which had suffered immense losses and decimation during the war, some historians and economists call what happened to the Japanese economy after World War II the Japanese miracle, because the Japanese economy bounced back incredibly fast, much in part due to its shift away from producing military goods, which it had been doing before the war, but primarily in two different industries. The automobile industry, manufacturing cars. I think Toyota, Honda are two Japanese brands that dominate the American automobile industry today. And then also electronics. Japan was a forerunner in electronics. And certainly this could be a case of globalization because Japanese electronic products are all over the place. But Japan, the Japanese miracle, and I've seen questions even going far as back as the Meiji Restoration with Japanese cotton industry. So there seems to be definitely this sort of fascination with Japan's economy. So I would definitely keep that one ready to roll. And I would say the final sneaky topic that I've seen, and as I've been reviewing some essays over the last couple of days from past exams, the other topic that does seem to come up, and we didn't do a big coverage of this, is South America and Central America in the 1900s. So I wanted to make this the final kind of closing point before we all move on with our weekends. Mexico, as we mentioned, broke away from the Spanish in the early 1800s, and that was a good example of a revolution in which land redistribution becomes a staple of many other revolutions throughout world history. The Mexican peoples were one of the first groups that promoted the idea of land redistribution. Now, Mexico broke away from the Spanish. It was a good example of an Enlightenment-inspired revolution. Very similar to how throughout South America, many governments formed, many countries that we have in existence today, many of those formed as a result of independence revolutions against the Spanish Empire, with Simón Bolívar and Juan Morales, who led numerous revolutions throughout the 1820s and 30s in South America. But as a region, South America, Central America, and even the Caribbean remained very much under influence by Europeans and Americans, And what I would say about that region of the world is that although it was not imperialized, this is one of the few parts of the world that did not fall under the imperialism powers of the Europeans. The Europeans and the Americans sort of allowed for those countries to remain independent. They were not imperialized in the way that Africa or Southeast Asia was, or even parts of East Asia. However, the United States in particular maintained a very firm grasp, economically speaking, over Central, South America, as well as Latin America and the Caribbean. The United States established what were sometimes known as banana republics, and the name comes from the fact that many of the Caribbean islands produced fruits that were then, exported to the United States and other parts of the world. But America's policy throughout the 1900s towards South and Central and Latin America was predominantly to keep a tight economic grasp. And a great example of that is the Panama Canal, because the United States ended up building the Panama Canal after the French had failed. And I would say that that's one of the key 5-6 topics if they end up asking anything about the Americas. The United States really committed economically. And so a lot of American businesses, a lot of American technology and corporations made their home bases in Latin America. And Cuba is a good example. And that's one of the reasons what motivated the Cuban Revolution, to drive the influence of the Americans out of Cuba. So certainly the United States was very much involved, very much entrenched in that region of the world. And consequently, South America, Central America, and Latin America, although it developed independently, and although those countries were not taken over, they still fell into some of the patterns of imperialism, especially economic imperialism. But look, at this point, everyone, I would just say I could go on for hours, and it would be like throwing darts at a board, because I don't know what's going to be on the test. And any teacher that tells you they do know what's going to be on the test, they don't know any more than I do. So at this point, we're all in the same boat. We're waiting anxiously to see what topics will be on there. I've tried to give you just a couple, ones to be on your radar. Use your review books, use your notes, use the internet for whatever you can find on these topics if you want to go deeper. But remember, on Monday night, I will be having my first and only YouTube live session where I will be broadcasting, and we'll go over this on Monday, how it works. When we also talk about feminism, and we work on the DBQ doc listing. So whether this is published today, Saturday, when I'm recording it, or tomorrow, hopefully you guys catch this and you're ready for Monday's class. I wish you guys a great rest of the weekend. Have a nice Saturday and Sunday with all your families, and get your studying in. As always, you guys know the past shapes the future, and we're hoping that's going to lead us to great glory. That sounded so cheesy. Let's just hope we do well on the test on Thursday. I'm going to leave it at that. All right, everyone. Take care. Have a great rest of your weekend.